Nuclear war and me trying to persuade people, don't drink. Take care of yourself, take vitamins, exercise. Your country needs you.
I love you, but I'm going to go get a cocktail.
I understand. I understand.
And I'm watching it. I have to watch it with a cocktail.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you, Joy. Have a great weekend. And thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. You know, even though the weekend is coming up, Joy's is starting right now. Even though the weekend is coming up, even though it is a holiday weekend for many people because of Easter, it is still likely to be a very busy few days in the news coming up, even through the weekend and into the beginning of next week. This is sort of an unusually forward-looking Friday night. Usually at a time like this, we'd be looking back at what happened over the past week. Right now, we sort of are on the precipice of a whole bunch of news that's about to happen. Tomorrow in Washington, D.C., as Joy and other people have been reporting tonight, in D.C. and in dozens of cities around the country, there are going to be tax marches tomorrow. Tax Day protests, April 15th protests, basically against the new president, Donald Trump. The tax marches specifically will be demanding that he should release his tax returns. He, of course, remains the only president in the modern era who has refused to do that. Now, in terms of expectations, we don't expect those marches tomorrow to be as big as the marches that took place right after the inauguration, the women's marches. I don't know that any American protests will ever be that big ever again. But still, what happens tomorrow might be the biggest anti-Trump protests that have happened since the women's marches. So we shall see. Keep an eye out for that tomorrow in D.C. and in cities across the country. Also, expect over the course of this weekend an increasing pace of legal pressure and media attention and political pressure, maybe protests as well, focusing on the state of Arkansas. Because on Monday night, Arkansas is due to start this remarkable series of double-header executions, right? We talked about this last night. You've probably heard about this in the news. Arkansas has scheduled 8 executions. They plan to kill 8 prisoners over the course of 10 days. Their plan is to kill 2 men a night on 4 different nights over a 10-day period starting on Monday. So far, the courts have blocked 2 of the 8 planned killings, including one of the executions that was planned to be on Monday night. I mean, this is a very unusual plan from Arkansas. No state has done a mass execution like this since capital punishment was reinstated in the 1970s. Arkansas has not executed anybody at all in 12 years. Arkansas has never executed anybody ever with one of the drugs that they are trying to rush to kill all these guys with. I mean, the idea of a double-header execution, even just one double-header execution, let alone 4 of them in a week and a half, that is something that other states with more experience of capital punishment, they have warned against doing that. They say trying to do 2 in one night makes it much, much harder on the execution staff and on the medical teams, particularly if they are inexperienced. But again, that execution spree in Arkansas is supposed to start on Monday night. You will likely see a bunch of headlines about it late tonight, tomorrow, and through the weekend. Just tonight, just as I was coming down to the makeup room and then into the studio, just within the last few minutes, a court put in place a temporary restraining order that blocks the use of one of the 3 drugs the state was planning to use for these lethal injections. And the court has just blocked this drug that is not even the most controversial of the 3 drugs they were planning on using. So that ruling was just tonight, just happened within the last hour. The state says they are apparently going to appeal that ruling. So we'll see. Right now, it's a temporary restraining order that says the state can't use for any of those executions one of the drugs it was planning on. Expect the legal wrangling and the appeals and the political pressure and the media attention to stay heavy and to increase over the course of the weekend. Again, Arkansas wanted to start killing those guys on Monday. Right now, it's not clear they'll be allowed to kill any of them. On top of all that, there's also going to be a lot of electoral politics news over the next few days, because on Tuesday of next week, there's that big congressional election in Georgia, where Democrats are trying their darndest to take a congressional seat that has been red for decades. This is Health Secretary Tom Price's old seat. Democrats have coalesced around a young Georgia Democrat named John Ossoff. They're trying to turn the 6th district in Georgia into a blue seat. Democrats think they've got a shot at winning this seat. Republicans say that Democrats have no chance. We will find out soon, though. Early voting in that race ended today, and Election Day itself will be on Tuesday. You should expect a lot of attention toward that over the weekend. So this has already been a very busy week in the news. Early next week is stacked up with a bunch of really big things in the news. But before we even get to that stuff early next week, we do have to make it through tonight and this weekend. And part of the new uncertainty around that, the reason lots of people in the news business canceled plans for this weekend, and everybody's on call at least, is because this weekend is the birthday of Kim Il-sung, who's the founding president of North Korea. And of course, it's a birthday. It happens every year. But this year, it is happening while we, too, in our country, have a new president. And our new president has just had a particularly balmy week. Balmy as in bombs away, not balmy as in nice weather in Mar-a-Lago this weekend. Last week, Thursday night, the new president abandoned his long-held public emphatic insistence that the United States should not launch attacks on Syria, even if Syria used chemical weapons. Last week, he threw out that long-standing public position, what we believed to be the policy of the United States of America, since he had campaigned on it and he's commander-in-chief. He threw that policy out the window, changed tack 180 degrees, and a week ago last night, launched 59 Tomahawk missiles at a Syrian airbase. Now, this did not represent, apparently, some sort of deliberate change in U.S. policy towards Syria. It now seems clear that that missile strike was, if anything, an abandonment of what had been stated U.S. policy in Syria. Part of the way you can tell that is that that missile strike has been followed by a week of confused, contradictory, all-over-the-map statements from the administration about what that missile strike was for, why the United States did it, what it means about what we're trying to get done in Syria in the larger sense that we now have started shooting missiles at their air bases. I will say, from a White House perspective, it seems that they are less concerned about the criticism of their incoherence on this matter and more just excited about how that missile strike got the president the first good round of press he has had in his entire presidency. I mean, there do remain these niggling questions like, what was that for? What is the United States trying to do in Syria? What are 1,000 U.S. service members risking their lives for tonight in Syria? What is the U.S. mission in Syria? And does that missile strike help or hurt that mission? Those questions remain. There also remains an interesting question about how the decision was made to launch that strike. The administration released, of course, this makeshift situation room photo from the night the strike was launched. For a big change in course military decision, there are some unexpected staffers in the Situation Room who are apparently participating in that decision. I mean, there's the chief economic advisor to the president. There's the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, Goldman Sachs guy. What's he doing there? There's Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross sitting right next to the president. The president's 36-year-old son-in-law was there. Also, Spicy's there back in the corner. White House spokesman, why is he there? The guy from Breitbart is there. Yeah. We do not see in this photo the Director of National Intelligence or the CIA director or any military personnel other than the one uniformed gentleman who is standing at the door. Tonight, a former CIA official tells us that the reason the Director of Central Intelligence, Mike Pompeo, was not there in that room, in fact, he wasn't in on the decision to launch that missile strike at Syria, is because he was giving a speech that night to a private equity group. So he didn't participate in the decision. So the Central Intelligence Agency director wasn't in on this, didn't participate in it. But meanwhile, don't worry, Steve Mnuchin was there, helping make the decision to bomb Syria. So the banking world got to have its cake and eat it too. That was the start of this literally explosive week for this young presidency. Then yesterday it was bombs away again. The new president has yet to talk about Afghanistan since he has been president. He has yet to articulate any policy or even general inclination toward that 15-year-old war. The basic idea, at least in terms of what most Americans think we're doing there, is that thousands of U.S. troops are still in Afghanistan because the U.S. military is trying to create a security environment in which the Afghan government can stand up. U.S. troops are there in support of the Afghan government and Afghan security forces so that country doesn't fall again to the Taliban like they did before 9/11. I mean, I think that's the basic idea we all have as Americans as to what we are doing in Afghanistan. But into the middle of that fight yesterday, the new administration decided to roll out a gigantic super bomb that had never been used before in combat. The United States has had these mega bomb GBU-43Bs. They've had these bombs, the mother of all bombs. They've had them for about 14 years. They cost about $16 million each. No other commander-in-chief has ever seen the need to use one before now. But yesterday, they decided to roll one out in Afghanistan. Why not? For context here, the United States does not have an ambassador in Afghanistan. The president has not spoken on Afghanistan. He has not said what he wants to do in that country. But militarily, he's just done something that's never been done before there or anywhere. For some reason, he just used the most unimaginably giant bomb the United States military has got short of a nuclear weapon, and he used it to kill, reportedly, about 36 ISIS-affiliated fighters. About $500,000 per guy. Here's a very strange development on that story that has just broken tonight. Last night, on that story, The Hill newspaper published a story about that bomb, the use of that bomb, the decision to use that bomb. And in their story, The Hill published a number of quotes from somebody who they described as a CENTCOM spokesman. And the quotes were attributed to an unnamed but apparently official CENTCOM spokesman. CENTCOM, of course, is the military central command, which means it's the part of the U.S. military for which their area of responsibility is the Middle East. And so they're quoting this CENTCOM spokesman, military spokesman, but the quotes are a little weird for a military spokesman. I'll show you what I mean. Asked by The Hill about what else was in the area that was hit by that giant bomb other than these ISIS fighters, the spokesman told The Hill this, quote, "I can guarantee there's nothing in the area. It's pure enemy." It's pure enemy. Military spokesmen in the United States don't talk like this. But then there's this. Asked about why they used this giant bomb that the U.S. has never used before, the spokesman said this, quote, "We mean business. President Trump said prior that once he gets in, he's going to kick the beep out of the enemy. That was his promise, and that's exactly what we're doing." This is a U.S. military spokesman? Seriously? Actually, no. Turns out not. CENTCOM just tonight put out a follow-up press release. Look at this. This is actually from CENTCOM, and it's got a named person on it. For immediate release, U.S. Central Command Media Advisory. Subject, statements attributed to unauthorized CENTCOM spokesman. Statements published on April 13th attributed to a U.S. CENTCOM were made by an individual unauthorized to speak on behalf of United States Central Command, and those statements do not reflect the professionalism of CENTCOM, said Major Josh Jacques here today. These statements fail to portray the values of more than 80,000 service members of the U.S. military currently serving in the CENTCOM area of responsibility, says Major Jacques, CENTCOM Media Division Chief. Quote, "Our media engagement mission is to provide accurate, impartial information to the public and their media representatives worldwide. Those inappropriate statements do not reflect the official views of CENTCOM or its leadership." The named spokesman added that the unofficial statements undermine the confidence of the public who expect more responsible and thoughtful insight. Wow, who's the fake spokesman? Who was telling the Hill newspaper that they were CENTCOM spokesman and they spoke on behalf of CENTCOM and they gave all these quotes? And it wasn't actually a CENTCOM spokesman. How is this something we have to worry about now? Fake spokesman? So, I mean, in terms of real take it to the bank information here, we really don't know much about why they used that giant bomb in Afghanistan. But when a supposed military spokesman says it was because Donald Trump wants to kick the bleep out of the enemy, turns out that wasn't a military spokesman. And CENTCOM has now apologized. That itself is very strange. There's that. So no one's quite sure how or why the call to use that particular weapon was made. We're not sure who to trust when we get an explanation about it. But regardless of all that, one thing the use of that bomb definitely did here at home was it produced another day of very excited, slightly confused, but nevertheless overwhelmingly positive good press for only the second time in this young presidency. First time was the missile strike. Second time was the mother of all bombs. So he's had 2 full days of good press, and both of them were for this young president, this new president, deciding unilaterally to blow some stuff up, arguably without much consideration for how doing that would strategically fit into any larger American interest or any larger American military project. So that is the week that we are just coming out of. And now we have a weekend. Today, Air China canceled their regularly scheduled 3 times a week round-trip flights between Beijing and Pyongyang in North Korea. Air China has been a little vague as to why they canceled these flights, but it's not the first time they have called those flights off. Whether this was done for commercial reasons or political reasons or security reasons, we cannot say for sure, but what it means in practical terms is that the Beijing to Pyongyang air route, as of tonight, is now only served by one air carrier. It is served only by Air Koryo, K-O-R-Y-O, Air Koryo. And among other things, Air Koryo is internationally famous for its food. There is one foodstuff you are served as a passenger on Air Koryo. Famously, you only have one choice. Your choice is, do you want it or don't you? But the only thing they offer you is their burger. It arrives at your seat, wrapped up in a little cartoony wrapper. It says Hamburg on it. A little character sliding something very small into something that looks like vanilla wafers. I don't know. Now, it's kind of cute. It arrives in a little wrapper. Turns out it is not served in that wrapper to keep it warm. The burger is reportedly served ice cold. And when you unfold its little cartoony wrapper, what you find is, ta-da! Behold, that is the burger. We have a number of pictures of the burger because it seems like anybody who has ever flown on Air Koryo, anybody who has ever been able to evade the no pictures rule and sneak a picture of the food, it seems like everybody has managed to take a picture of the burger and post this picture online. Feast your eyes on that. That is the food. That's the burger. It's been down today, so I haven't been able to check it. They are, though, reported to have a handful of international routes. They fly to Beijing and to 2 other cities in China. They also fly to Vladivostok in Russia. Oh, right, communism. North Korea remains one of the last communist countries on Earth. They were an ally in good standing of the old communist Soviet Union. And follow the through line, Air Koryo flies Soviet-made planes. I don't mean former Soviet Union, now Russian-made planes. I mean, they fly Soviet-made planes, made by the Soviet Union when it was still the Soviet Union. That's their air fleet. And it's interesting, North Korea is now trying at least a little bit to attract international airplane geek tourism from people who want to fly the friendly North Korean skies in planes that have cockpits that look like this, where they serve you ice-cold mystery beige burgers that leak a thin red watery sauce that doesn't seem like blood, but nobody can quite place it. Incidentally, my favorite detail about Air Koryo is that where they chill the burgers, where they keep them so cold, is in refrigerators that look like this, that they tuck into the galley on these old Soviet planes. North Korea is preserved in amber in a lot of ways. They're economically and ideologically constrained by their government in a way that makes them unlike any other place on Earth. We've all seen the pictures of the Korean Peninsula from space, where north of the demilitarized zone, North Korea looks like it might just be the sea. It looks like it's the ocean because there are no lights. They have so little electricity. But North Korea, they do have Air Koryo. They do have an internationally well-regarded core of military hackers. Remember the Sony hack by the North Koreans? North Korea may not have done much for its people, but they do have nuclear weapons, and they do have a 1 million-man army, and they do have an increasingly full range of ballistic missiles, and they do have a huge amount of powerful conventional artillery that they have put along their southern border, pointing at South Korea, pointing in the direction of Seoul, where about 20 million people live. And this weekend is Kim Il-sung's birthday, which is often occasion for the North Korean government to show off new weapons technology. This year, first of all, what's that likely to be, and when will we know? But also, do we expect our own new president to make excellent, well-thought-out decisions for all the right reasons, working from all the best information, with a full appreciation of the delicate strategic sensibilities surrounding this paranoid, slightly insane, armed-to-the-teeth country? Whether or not it makes you feel better or worse about that prospect, I should tell you our new president spent today at his resort in South Florida, apparently golfing. Meanwhile, what appears to be a massive North Korean military parade appears to be taking shape. I'll be right back. Stay with us. It is evening on the east coast of the United States. It is morning now on the Korean Peninsula. And specifically in North Korea, it is the morning of the birthday of Kim Il-sung, who is the founding president of North Korea. And that means Pyongyang looks like this right now. These are live images, actually. These are the first images we are getting in of what appears to be a very large commemoration. We're expecting this probably to be a large military parade that they will hold in Pyongyang to celebrate that birthday. They do something along these lines, at least something big every year on Kim Il-sung's birthday. But this year, North Korea has also reportedly been on the brink of possibly testing some new weapon. Maybe a new nuclear device, maybe a new long-range missile that could conceivably transport a nuclear device far around the globe. The United States has sent what the president described as a, quote, armada to the waters off the Korean peninsula. I'm not sure that's the word he meant, but there is an aircraft carrier group there. And this is a new American president who has been getting a lot of good press for shooting bombs and missiles places with not much notice over the last week or so. Could be quite a weekend. Joining us now is Sue-Mi Terry. She's a former senior analyst on Korean issues at the CIA. Dr. Terry, it's really good to have you here. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Those images that we just saw from Pyongyang, is that sort of typical in terms of the way this holiday, is commemorated every year?
Yes, and they will have a big parade, and we'll see, they will showcase all their missiles and whatever they want to showcase.
And
it's a big holiday.
Is that an important, in terms of those parades, obviously they're putting on display what they want to put on display. Are they conveying implicit threats with those parades? Do they roll out new things that we didn't know they had at those parades?
Sure. So, for example, they can roll out an ICBM to show the world that it has an intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach the United States.
In terms of their missile capacity already, they have 2- and 3-stage ICBMs that they say they've already developed. Right. What's the state of the sort of U.S. view of that missile capacity? Do we believe they've got actually operational ICBM capacity?
Because they have not tested the ICBM that could reach the mainland United States, successfully tested, so we don't know that, but I think they're very close to testing it. Already, our territories in the Pacific, including Guam and Hawaii, Guam and Japan and South Korea, are all under threat, but they have not yet tested ICBM that could reach mainland United States.
In terms of this weekend, this holiday, this parade, which seems to be taking shape right now in Pyongyang, and the previous reporting that we've had that there was unusual activity viewed by satellite around some of their launch test facilities. As somebody who worked at the CIA on these issues, what do you think they are planning on doing? How much of an escalation, if any, do you expect from them?
Well, they are preparing for 6 nuclear tests. Although, because the whole world is now expecting 6 nuclear tests, they might not decide to test it this weekend. North Korea likes to be the one that surprises the rest of the world. And so they said they will test when they want to test. And there are other holidays coming up, like Korean People's Army anniversary late this month on the 28th. So they don't have to test the 6 nuclear weapon this particular weekend. But there are other things they can do. They can do a normal missile test that they've been doing before. They can showcase an ICBM. There's other things they can do.
There is an aircraft carrier that has been directed, U.S. aircraft carrier that has been directed there. We have seen, we have a new president who we don't fully understand either. He has gotten, I mean, it's weird to bring this up, but I think it's a factor here. He's gotten the first sort of 2 days of good press of his new presidency by doing taking military action against the Syrian government for the first time, taking military action in Afghanistan using a weapon that has never been used before. If this president is weighing, for whatever reason, some type of novel, newly aggressive military action toward North Korea, what are the options and what are the likely consequences?
He could weigh an option of intercepting a missile, or he could be weighing an option of striking nuclear test site. But I honestly don't think he's going to follow through with this. And this is a problem with the brinkmanship policy, because you're putting yourself in a bind. Either you have to back down, or you have to and sort of lose your credibility, or you have to, now you're stuck on a ledge and risk a military option, which is very, very risky. North Korea is not Syria. It's not Afghanistan. It's going to have devastating consequences. North Korea will retaliate to any kind of military option.
And they'll retaliate against South Korea.
Absolutely retaliate against South Korea. North Korea has some 70% of its ground forces and some 50% of its air, and naval forces are deployed within 100 kilometers from the DMZ, demilitarized zone, that are separating the 2 Koreas. That's 60 miles. And you said there's 20 million people in Seoul. There's 28,500 American soldiers in Korea. There's some 150,000 U.S. expats in Seoul. This is why I just don't think this kind of brinkmanship policy it's just not a smart idea. gross miscalculation.
Even without a novel missile capacity, even without nuclear weapons, there are millions of people who are soft targets, who are within easy reach of the North Korean military if they choose to take that action. Sue Mi Terry, who's a former senior analyst on Korean issues at the CIA. Dr. Terry, it's very good to have you here. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. Up next, I mentioned a little bit about this at the top, but we do have another breaking news story that we are covering tonight. Seems like Friday night stuff happens late into the evening. God doesn't want anybody to have Fridays off this year. We'll have more on that breaking news story straight ahead. Stay with us. So late this evening, just as we were getting on the air, we got this breaking news. An Arkansas judge tonight has blocked the state of Arkansas from using one of the lethal injection drugs that the state was planning to use in its record execution spree that was due to start on Monday night. This is the Arkansas situation where that state wants to kill 2 men a night on 4 separate nights for a total of 8 executions in the span of 10 days. Nothing like that has happened since capital punishment was reinstated by the Supreme Court in the 1970s. We're not used to mass executions in this country. Well, that was controversial enough, but then as of this afternoon, 2 of the 8 executions had already gotten themselves blocked by the courts. And now, tonight, a judge has just issued a temporary restraining order that apparently will block Arkansas from using one of the 3 drugs they were planning on using to kill these men. It will block them from using a drug that's called vecuronium bromide. The company that makes vecuronium bromide has asked the court to step in. The company is basically not consenting to the use of their drug for this purpose, for these executions. The company said when they realized what the state was planning to do with their drug, they objected. They asked for their drug back. They say the state told them they would get the drug back. The drug would be returned to the company, but then apparently they reneged. And Arkansas still planned on using their vecuronium bromide. And so the company has gone to the courts. And tonight, the court has issued a restraining order in their favor. It remains to be seen what will happen in Arkansas. That execution spree in Arkansas was supposed to start Monday night. Tonight, those killings remain in question, given this last-minute ruling tonight from this Arkansas judge and the 2 prisoners' cases that have been ruled on separately and blocked as executions in separate cases. Joining us now over the phone is Scott Braden. He's the attorney for one of the 8 men in Arkansas who was slated for execution over the next 2 weeks. His client was actually granted a stay by the courts tonight. Mr. Braden, thanks very much for joining us. I know it's a short notice booking for you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So let me just make sure I've got this right. 2 court rulings tonight. There's this restraining order apparently blocking all the executions by blocking the use of one of the drugs. But before that, tonight, there was a separate order that blocked the execution of your client, Bruce Ward. Do I have that right in terms of the separate cases here?
Yes, that's correct. The Arkansas Supreme Court granted our emergency stay of execution tonight so that they can ensure that there's full briefing and the full consideration by the court of the important constitutional issue in Mr. Ward's case, and that is whether he's competent to be executed under the 8th Amendment.
So that emergency stay of execution, what sort of time does that buy you in terms of litigating that issue of concern for your client? How long do you expect this stay to be in effect?
Well, I expect the Arkansas Supreme Court will consider this matter with the gravity that they do in these issues and that they've always done. And I suspect that the stay that they've entered here is to allow full consideration of this issue, which would contemplate 40 days worth of briefing at least, and probably an oral argument. So I think if they meant to do otherwise, they would have set a schedule out in the order they issued this afternoon.
Okay. Can I also ask you what your understanding is of the legal fight right now over the use of these specific drugs? The state is planning on using a 3-drug protocol. One of those drugs, midazolam, seems to have been the thing that led to this rushed schedule by the state. They apparently wanted to line up all these executions so quickly because their midazolam was due to expire. But as far as I understand it, the drug that was the subject of this restraining order tonight was actually not the midazolam. It was another one of these drugs. The drug company essentially saying that they do not consent to it being used in this way. They wanted it back from the state. Can you give us any of your understanding in terms of the legal fight over the drugs themselves?
Well, honestly, I don't know much more about it than you do. I don't represent any of the parties in that action, and we're not involved in that. But I think that's right. I think that's the arguments that they've made. But I do know that we've spent 4 days in federal court this week putting on a case showing that midazolam is certainly going to cause a problematic and painful execution and will violate the 8th Amendment.
Scott Braden, attorney for one of the 8 men in Arkansas, Bruce Ward, who was slated for execution on Monday. Mr. Braden was able to get his client an emergency stay of execution tonight in the Arkansas State Supreme Court. Mr. Braden, I know this is an incredibly intense time for you and for your client. Thanks for letting us know what's going on. Please stay in touch with us over the course of the weekend as this continues to unfold.
Thank you for your interest in this.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Again, Arkansas has made a remarkable decision to try to do what is, in effect, a mass execution. They want to kill 8 men in 10 days. We now know that 2 of those executions are off. because of the individual circumstances of those cases. But it looks like, because of this ruling tonight, that all of those executions may be off, at least temporarily, if the state is not able to successfully appeal this restraining order on the use of one of these drugs that they're planning to use to kill all of these men. Fascinating and bizarre story out of Arkansas. Stay with us.